I'm Mike, also known as Mike Hager, also known as Michael Demise, depending on who you ask. I book shows for El Paso Hardcore, formerly under 525 Productions, formerly under Sleep It Off Productions, formerly under Just Myself. I also sang for the band Funeral Room. I've been going to shows for a very long time now and happy to be here. So, El Paso scene for me was very different than it was now. Shows were, I would say, packed pretty much all the time. There was this local bar called Chicks, right across from where what everyone knows as Rock House is currently. My first show there was in 2006. It was Through the Eyes of the Dead, From a Second Story Window, Light This City. Probably I Burn Your Diary was the local at that time. It was a great time. I had a couple of first shows though. That was like my first introduction into like the smaller scale of shows, when I was more introduced into like the scene as to what I currently knew it. When I was first introduced into like live music in general, there were two separate times. When I had just gotten out of 8th grade, I went with a couple of friends. My parents had no idea that I went. I went to go see Slipknot, Lamb of God, and Shadows Fall at the Coliseum. That was like my first introduction to like real live music, and I think from that point I was hooked. And then my mom, bless her soul, when I was a freshman in high school, right before I was a freshman in high school, she took me to a KLAQ barbecue so I could go see Seether and Crossfade, because she loved Crossfade at the time too. She didn't know anything about that band, but she did like the song Cold. So that was between like the two of us. But yeah, Through the Eyes of the Dead was my first like actual show. And I think from then on, consistently, I was going to shows basically any opportunity I got. I was fully getting dropped off by my parents at Chicks any opportunity I could. That's when shows were the most affordable they've ever been. Everything was $10. Shirts were $10. My parents were happily giving me money because they knew I was staying out of trouble, and they didn't have to buy me clothes for school because they would give me like $20 and then I would come home with like an outfit essentially. But yeah, that was my introduction to shows, and like I was hooked from the beginning, and just now in my 30s I've just never stopped going since. So funny enough, I don't think it was necessarily that I thought something was missing from the scene. Me booking shows was an entirely selfish endeavor. I met Thomas and the entire Nailier crew because at that point when I was booking shows, it was 2011. So I had been going to Nailier shows pretty consistently at that point after I had graduated high school and was in community college. Met Thomas and then realized that, oh, he's just like a guy. Like, he's just a guy booking bands in his house. And I was like, I think that's just how it works. So there was this band at the time, they're called The Carrier. I really wanted to see The Carrier. They had a day off between, it was probably the usual Dallas and Phoenix off day that like most bands tend to have when they pass through El Paso. It was like 2 days before the show, and I was punishing The Carrier nonstop on Instagram, I think at the time. No, it was Twitter. I was DMing Twitter, and I was DMing Death Wishes, the record label, on Twitter as well. Like, who do I have to talk to get The Carrier to play? Eventually, I got in touch with a very good friend, Josh Sparks. He played drums for that band Former Thieves, who was also on tour with The Carrier. And I said, how do I get the two of you to play in El Paso? He just said, we'll just play. He said, we'll play. And then I eventually got a hold of The Carrier. They said, we'll play too. And it's kind of the rest is history from there. I had a great time booking the show. I was introduced early on to the stresses of booking a show, which is crazy because of course it's going to be stressful when I'm booking a show like literally 2 days before the date that I was going to be. But yeah, ever since then, it was just like that's the vibe from now on. I was like, I guess this is just something that I'm like into now. I had really fun doing it, and I was like, oh, if this is what it takes for me to see bands, like that's fine. Me and Thomas kind of have like similar but different music tastes. So I was like, oh, if there's bands that Thomas won't book and he'll let me just have them play in his house, then why the fuck not? There's way too much involved in booking a hardcore show. There's actually like two distinct levels of booking a hardcore show. I think there's the more DIY level. That's more of like hitting up a band and just being like, hey, do you want to play a show? They either say yes or no. You get some piece of shit venue, and then you have a show. You give them whatever you make at the door, and then it's fine. That's easy, simple enough. Once you start getting into like the upper levels of shows, like what I was really doing before I retired, that starts with usually a booking agent will hit you up first at that point. They'll hit you up typically 5-6 months before the show date, ideally. They'll let you know X band is coming through. First, they'll ask for holds, which is like, they don't know for sure which date that they're going to need. So they'll give you like, we need holds on a venue from this day to this day. So then I'll hit up a venue. At this time, it probably would have been like Rock House, since that's mainly what I was using for shows at the time. I'll say, hey, I need holds on this venue from this day to this day. They'll tell me if they're available or not, or if like other bands or booking agents have already had holds on that. If they do, I say, okay, well, put me down for those dates anyway, and then I'll be second holds or third, fourth, whatever on some dates, and then first holds on some. I report back to the agent and say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what we're looking like on those dates. They say, okay, cool. I typically don't hear anything back for several weeks at that point. And then we start talking offer, which is how much money the show is, which is typically, most bands at this level will ask for a guarantee, which for the uninitiated, it is exactly what it sounds. It's a guaranteed amount of money that usually only the headliner wants for that night, and then budget is split between other bands on that show accordingly. Normally, most booking agents don't know that El Paso is not the strongest market to have shows. So the first thing they say is, how much can you offer on a guarantee? I will usually say, well, how much do you want? Like, realistically, how much do you want? I will say, I'm not trying to lowball you. So typically they'll say something along the lines of, well, we're looking for this much. And I say, absolutely not. That will not happen in El Paso. So I say, usually we'll do a counter offer. We'll go back and forth on that for a little bit until we agree to a figure. If I have my way, what I will do is I will offer them a door deal, which is exactly as it sounds. It's a portion of the door. That's the best kind of thing that you can get as a show promoter. You want a door deal because typically it's a way to ensure that like the band gets paid, and you essentially can't lose money on that in a sense, unless something insane happens. So usually that's that phase of that. You'll go back and forth between how much the money is. Once you get that locked in, it's kind of a matter of, okay, the show's confirmed at that point. Then it's like you're talking about like catering budgets and stuff like that. That's kind of whatever at that point. That's usually factored into the guarantee as well, though. After that, it's usually a matter of finding locals for a show. And that can be a little bit different. It depends very much on, one, the band and the booking agent. Sometimes, if it's a big enough band, they will want the locals to be approved for the show, which means you'd have to send like a link to like music or something just to make sure that it's chill. Some bands don't want something that's too out of the genre for the show. I love a mixed bill personally. If I can, I'll mix things up as much as I can. That's ideally what's good for me. You want people you want the freaks from one genre mixing with the freaks of the other genre coming together for one big show. What I like to do ideally, though, I like to keep it at a 4-band show if at all possible. 5 is like, I'll do 5. Anything over 5, you can't pay me to do more than 5 on a show. And then usually at that point, I'll reach out to locals, say, hey, do you have this date available? If not, make yourself available if it's a cool enough show. And then usually for example, I will ask Thomas or yourself if Barbarian is open for a show. I'll ask Ricky if Maldito Dios is open for a show. They'll usually tell me yes. And then from that point, it goes on to, okay, I'll reach back out to the booking agent, let them know I have locals for a show. I will then make a flyer, send that flyer off to the booking agent as well to make sure everything looks good, make sure there's no changes needed to be made, make sure the flyer looks good. And then from that point, it's just a matter of waiting for the show to happen. And then I stay stressed the fuck out for several months. And then show date happens. Then it's the logistics of the show. If you've seen me work a show before, I'm stressed the fuck out at the door all day until the end of the show because I need people to show up, obviously, so I don't lose my ass on the show that I'm paying touring bands for. And then once it's done, you settle out with bands. Usually they have a tour manager that you'll give the money to at the night. Then the tour manager pays out whoever they need to pay out for the night. Then you pay the venue, whatever your venue expenses are, and then you go home, and then usually afterwards you meet at El Cometa, and it's a wonderful night from there. And that's usually the typical process for booking a show, unless I lose a lot of money on a show, in which case I go home and eat ice soup for 2 weeks. Well, I think calling Funeral Room, the band I was in, a hardcore band, is a little bit of a stretch. I don't know what you'd call us. We were a little bit weird. I like that. I think if I'm going to be in another band at some point, I like that we weren't a hardcore band because I think we got enough of those, I think, at this point. So I like that it was something a little bit different. But I don't know if it necessarily changed a lot from how I viewed things. It was just more of a fun thing to do instead of just like being the guy that books the bands all the time and watching bands. It was just fun being the guy in the band for once. Funeral Room was a good time. It was there was this local band, Missing Link, not the current Missing Link that's very popular and like actually doing things, but a local punk band called Missing Link with Andre and Eric, who run Doghouse Print Co., and this dude Rodney, who is a man of mystery who just materializes out of nowhere sometimes, but I love him to death every time I see him. I think we just randomly were talking one day and they were trying to start a band that like wasn't Missing Link. And I was like, yo, I'm so down. And then that's kind of just how it happened. Just showed up and to Eric's parents' place at the time, I think, just started jamming. And then that eventually turned into Funeral Room and just played shows for, I think, almost a year. And then it kind of just fell apart, kind of. Which is fine. It happens. Eric became a dad, so he got very busy. And then, of course, once like Doghouse happened, and between that and when they were doing Compound at the time, they just had zero time for it, which, like, I get it. I punish them all the time about getting Funeral Room back, but if it happens, cool. If not, I don't really care either way. But it was a really good time. One thing that I did really like about it, though, is I would very selfishly put us on shows that I think would be cool. So it was always good not having to stress about, like, oh, I have at least one guaranteed local for a show that, like, will not say no. So that was always good. So I think there's two distinct periods where it was really hard when I was booking shows for El Paso Hardcore. First was for sure losing the Nail Air. It was a pinnacle of the scene for years, and losing it was absolute tragedy. You can ask Thomas for sure. It's like things kind of fell apart for a bit afterwards. Once we lost that, we had virtually no venues that weren't like Tricky Falls or something like that at the time, and we're not booking a fucking no-name hardcore show at Tricky Falls, like, that's for sure. Not yet, at least. But yeah, we didn't really have anything until like the Spot came around, and then we started booking shows there until we couldn't. But I think after that, the second hardest time for El Paso Hardcore was for sure after COVID. Like right before COVID hit, there was like a real boom, I think, of shows. Shit was getting real packed. Things were looking good. There was a Rotting Out show at Lowbrow, like I think literally the week before COVID hit, that was crazy packed. Kids were going off, and I just remember standing there being like, oh shit, like things are kind of like really happening. And then lockdown happened, no shows for however long that was. Things came back. I attempted to book shows again. I remember one of the first shows I did back was Wrist Meat Razor, Chamber, and Omerta. Omerta dropped and Momentum ended up hopping on the tour, and that show absolutely fucking tanked. I think like maybe 11, 12 people showed up or something like that. It was a door deal, so it's like, sure, bands got paid, but like not really like anything substantial. And like it sucked because it was just like everything that we had built prior to that like fell apart in like an instant, and it was just such a bummer to see. So yeah, things really fell apart for a bit, but I think now things are like on a really good upswing from what I can see. Like the kids are really holding it the fuck down, I think, and it's like really awesome to see. So shit's gonna get hard before it gets better for El Paso a lot of the time, I think, but barring any more tragedies, I think we're on another upswing here, knock on wood. Post-COVID, those first few shows, I think that's when I was first like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this anymore. Because for the most part, when I was like actively, like really active booking shows, I was still living with my parents. So like, like my job was 100% disposable income. I didn't have to worry about rent. I didn't have to worry about like food at all ever. I didn't have to worry about anything really. So like any money that I made, I could afford to lose money on a show because I didn't have any expenses. At that point, like I was living with someone. So it's like, well, I have all these expenses. I have bills now. So it's like, I can't afford to be losing like mad money on a show at this point anymore. So I think that year was when I was like, I need to start winding shit down a little bit. I booked shows like here and there a little bit after that. And then in 2022, I think it was, that's when I was like, I'm going to do one quote unquote final show, and that's going to be it for me. I did Sanguisugabog and Undeath at Rock House, and I was like, it's going to be it. I am officially retiring. I lied. But that was a good time. And I think now I'm at a point where I think I'm okay with doing shows occasionally now. I make the joke to myself that like I'll do one show a year, essentially is kind of where I'm at. Like last year I did the Days tour, and that did surprisingly really well against all my expectations. That did really well. So I think the scene's in a good place now where I don't need to be booking shows all the time. There's other people that are carrying the torch now. Like, we have Amaret doing No Push Mosh. We have, Rami doing shows at the Cannibal Den. We have Ever doing Class and Grief booking. There's people doing shit here in town. Like Ricky's picking up booking shows now. So I think now it's better because I don't feel that the responsibility is on me to be booking shows, where there was a long period of time where I for sure felt that like I had to be the one booking it, because if I wasn't, no one else was going to. And I'm glad that I was able to take that stress off myself, because now it's okay. I feel like it's okay for me to book a show every once in a while without feeling like I have to keep this up, or else the scene's going to collapse if I don't. So greatest achievement in booking shows is I think just achieving like a sellout at all, which I can say that I've done like twice at this point, which even doing it once is kind of crazy, but being able to do it twice is pretty sick also. My favorite shows are obviously going to be both sellouts. The first one is going to be, I'm just going to shout out to the Days tour that I did recently. That was Torture, Balmora, Sanction, Final Resting Place, Ajara, and Barbarian. I was stressed the fuck out about that show for months and was fully expecting to lose my entire ass on that show. Guarantee was several $1,000s, and I was stressing the fuck out. But it did extremely well. Obviously, it didn't fully sell out, but enough to where we consider it a sellout. Was fucking awesome. My other favorite show was my other sellout. This was in, I think, honestly, this year is the 10-year anniversary of that. I think, as of time of recording, I think it just passed. But it was Citizen, Turnover, Sorority Noise, and Milk Teeth. Crazy ass lineup. Sold the fuck out. Show was packed as fuck. That was at the Mesa Music Hall, which I believe was still called Electric Banana at this point. The younger kids will know that as what Club 101 is now on Mesa. Another show that just defied all odds and did really well. The venue owner of that place was a certified freak and was doing everything he could to try to make that show not go over well. But it did go over well, and I'm very thankful that it did, and I love having a sold-out show. Favorite bands I've ever worked with, there's a lot, but I think if I have to shout out one, my very, very good friends in Super Heaven. They are the nicest people I have ever met, and they are just super dope. They love El Paso. I punish them about coming back all the time. It's something I hope I can eventually make happen at some point, but they're like the biggest band in the world now thanks to TikTok, so who knows if that can happen, but they have been a gem to work with every time, and I love them to death. Favorite venue to work with, surprisingly, I would have to say Tricky Falls, mainly just because they're so fucking pro there. Like, it's like the most legit venue that I think we've ever had, aside from like what Lowbrow is now. And the lady that was my main contact there, this lady named Bobby Welsh, sweetest, kindest person, bent over backwards to make sure like I was accommodated and like shows went smoothly there. Anytime I did a show there, I went through her, and everything always went great there. So I have to give like a special shout out to her, whatever she's doing, wherever she's at right now, because she made every show that I did at Tricky Falls, whether it was the Rotting Out show that I did there, the 4 Year Strong show I did there, or like any show that I did at like the upstairs venue, she made it the smoothest, easiest process in the world. And yeah, Tricky Falls will always hold a special place in my heart for not only the crazy shows that they had there, but just because of how easy they made it to just book shows there in general. I think what makes El Paso feel so different from everywhere else is like based on location. Like we get passed over a lot, so we don't get a lot of shit here. So when we do, I feel like not just like I feel like saying kids is like a derogatory thing in the sense because it's not just the kids that get stoked for it, but like everyone that gets shows everyone that comes to shows, I mean, they get excited for it. Like we're hungry for shit when it happens. So like shows pop off here when they do pop off. Places like LA, places like Dallas, places like Austin, they get shit all the fucking time. So it's easy to get like complacent, and you get comfortable and you get used to having shit happening all the time. Like you go to Dallas, there's a show happening there every night. You go to LA, there's a show happening there every night. So it's just like you get everything there, so you're spoiled. So you're never left wanting for anything. El Paso is always left wanting for anything. The amount of times when I was like booking shows, when I would get people messaging me like about booking X or Y tour here, and I'd have to be like, no, is crazy, because it's like the kids want shit here. People want shit to happen here, and things would pop off here. People just got to give El Paso the chance. We're a hungry city for music, and I think now we're in a better place to satisfy that than we were even like a couple of years ago. There's a show in the works now that, based on time of release on this, I'm not comfortable talking about, but I don't know if this show could get announced or the show could be booked a couple years ago. I don't even know if something like the Days tour could have been booked a couple of years ago. I would have said no to that tour even a year before I had booked it. But I think now El Paso's in a good spot to where we're going to start getting more shit. I think we just need to keep what makes us special. We need to keep that hunger going. We need to keep that passion going. Because one thing I will say, brown people love their fucking music, man. We love that shit, especially when it comes to heavy stuff. I don't know what it is, but like whenever I was growing up, It's all about the rocker foo shit. Everyone loves the rocker foo shit. I went to high school with so many Slipknot and Slayer motherfuckers, like it's crazy. So I think we're hitting a groundswell right now, and I think we're getting to a point where things are going to start differentiating us less from bigger cities, but in like a good way. 1,000%. I think people underestimate us here. We're like a Passover city for sure. I mean, we're like the one stop between Dallas and Phoenix. We're a big city, but not big enough like Austin, Dallas, Houston, anything like that. So I think a lot of the understanding or what people think El Paso is like that there's not a scene here and there's nothing here for them, which is completely not the case. I think more bands need to give El Paso a chance for sure. Every time I've booked a show here, even if the show's not the most well attended, the bands have left being like, yo, that was fucking awesome. Because at least kids go the fuck off here. Like for hardcore shows, the kids fucking mosh. For the non-hardcore shows, like the kids know all the words to the songs and everything. Like I said before, we're hungry for shows here. I think a lot of it just has to do now with like touring's not a young man's game anymore. Like there are a lot of younger bands that are down as fuck for kind of whatever, but the drives are long, money's getting kind of tight now because things are so expensive. I mean, it was easier back in the day, I think, to justify like a lot of bands stopping here for like an off day, but then I think now it's like it's an additional expense because it's like, yeah, sure, you can stop here and play a show, but then it's like, what if the show's not like what you were expecting? And then there's like, what if it's not enough money to justify like justifying the stop here? So it's like, I get it to an extent. It sucks that like bands don't play here as often as I'd like, but I think now with how the economy has got like post COVID, you kind of do have to take that into consideration that like the off day is not something most people want to do anymore. A day off, I think nowadays is so valuable for people, especially when it's like you have like 6 or 7 days in a row of playing a show, and then you have this crazy long ass drive, and it's like the last thing I think a lot of bands want to do is play a show. But I think we're getting to a point now where El Paso is being considered as like an actual tour stop. Like Sanguisugabog is playing here on an off date on that Lamb of God tour, which is crazy that they're doing like an off day on a tour that's chasing buses. So they're going out of their way on a crazy driving schedule to play here, and I think that's cool. We had Nothing play here recently, and that was like an announced tour stop. So it's like bigger bands are coming here more often now. So I think it's more of now we're getting the shows, and I think word is getting around that like El Paso is a good place to play again. Man, it's fucking awesome, honestly. Um, I don't think that we would have been in a place a few years ago where the young kids would have been keeping it alive. I think that's something that we've been working towards for a while that I didn't think that we thought we were going to have for a minute. It looked like we got to a point where for a while where the kids didn't give a fuck about shows and didn't give a fuck about keeping shit alive. And there have been multiple points where I was just like, well, if it's just the same 9 people that are coming to shows all the time. And at that point, I think it started getting to, well, now it's the same 7 people that are coming to shows all the time, to the point where I started thinking, well, now it's just going to fucking die off. And now it's at this point where I'll go to a show. I know maybe 3 people there. And I think that's great. I love that I don't know the majority of people at shows because there's just new people coming in constantly. And I just hope that they all stay, because I think that's the thing. I think it's cool that there's a lot of kids coming out to shows now. I think it's cool that there's a lot of younger people booking shows now. But I think now it's a matter of getting it to stick and getting those kids to stay. Because if they don't stay, then it does not matter. Advice to give. I'll start with promoters. No unnecessary beef. We've been there. People will tell you the tale of Pony Productions. This guy that was he wanted to be the guy. He hated when other people were booking shows. He was like the only guy booking shows for a while. He was booking like huge bands though. He was booking like Suicide Silence. He was booking like the big death metal bands. Like I saw like Vital Remains shows and things like that. He was booking bands that like we weren't even really trying to compete with. Like the Alpha and Omega show that Thomas is booking in the living room at the Nail Air is not competing with the Winds of Plague show that Pony Productions is booking at Tricky Falls. But he saw it as competition because someone else was booking shows and he thought it was people taking money from him, when that's absolutely not the case. I think it's easy to let your ego get in the way. I'm guilty of it too. It has absolutely happened to me. I think it's a thing that just happens to people booking shows. You want to be the guy. You want to be the one that's booking the shows. You want to be the one responsible for being the like guardian of the scene or like the caretaker of the scene, when you don't have to be. I think as promoters, you need to work together. You need to collaborate. I think it's cool that like Glass and Grief does shows with raw meat booking. I think that's how it should be. You need to collaborate, because if you don't, this whole thing fucking implodes on itself. This isn't the fucking Warriors. We don't need to have beef. We don't. Anything from that just splits the scene apart. Like, we don't need cliques of different promoters. I think we can all have shows of different scenes, and we can have like a hardcore band play with a screamo band. We can have a screamo band play with an indie band. We can have an indie band play with a death metal band, and I think it should all be fine. We should all be able to go to shows together. As far as advice for bands, 15-minute changeovers are there for a goddamn reason. If you take longer than your 15-minute changeover to set up and tear down, you shouldn't be in a band. You should not be playing the show. It does not take you 25 minutes to take your shit off the stage. You don't need to take apart your drum kit on stage either. Get your shit off the stage and then disassemble your kit off the stage. That's what the grown-up bands do. Please don't do that. Please be on time. If you need to be at the show by a certain time, don't show up an hour after that time. You will no longer play shows. I promise you that. Things happen. I understand that bands have to drop shows. That's totally fine. It happens. But if you're going to drop a show, hey, let somebody know. I recently did a show where the locals weren't going to fucking tell me that they weren't going to play, I guess. And I had to find out secondhand, which is not cool. I'm not going to name names here, but they're no longer a band. But if they were still a band, they were never going to play one of my shows again after that. And that's just how it was going to be. As far as advice for like people that are attending shows, be welcoming to new people. Us old heads, we for sure made a mistake of not being as welcoming, I think, to a lot of the new kids. And I think we took that from our old heads too, because we were going to shows and they were fucking scary. They were some of the most violent things I had ever seen. And I'm pretty sure if I had caught a stray at one of those shows, I don't know if I would be here right now doing this interview, because I would have been like, well, I'm not going to this shit if I'm just going to get knocked the fuck out. Like, fuck that. I don't need medical bills to come from this shit. Be nice to your peers. Be nice to the younger kids at shows. I know it sounds corny and cliche, but like, if you want kids to keep coming out, it makes sense to be nice to them. I know I'm not the friendliest person in the world. People come up to me and I'm not, like, I know I'm not like as friendly as I should be, but I mean, I'm old, I'm grumpy. Give me a little bit of grace. I'm tired and I'm already kind of wishing I was home at that point. So I need to work on being better. I think a lot of us older heads need to work on being better, but you kids are the future of the scene. So just keep that in mind, that when you get older, new kids are going to come around too. Please don't make the same mistakes that we did and then the same mistakes that you see us doing. You have the opportunity to be better than us. So please take that chance and be better than us. Shout out the Nail Air. Shout out Thomas. Shout out David. Shout out Barbarian. Shout out Saberwolf. Shout out Ruben. Shout out Hector. Shout out Lobotomize the Undead. Shout out Marco. Shout out El Cometa. Shout out Ricky. Shout out Maldito Dios. Shout out to all my friends in touring bands. Shout out Super Heaven. Shout out Sea Haven. Shout out Light Years. Shout out Pentimento. Shout out No Pressure. Shout out The Story So Far. Shout out my boy Drew Pledger in Arizona. Shout out his band Peace of Mind. R.I.P. That shit was great. Shout out El Paso Hardcore. Shout out to all my friends. Shout out my family. And shout out to you.